Zurn 1 Systems, Pressure Assist EcoFlush Technology. In today's age, with energy and conservation being such an important issue in society, Zurn Industries has been developing and producing the most efficient plumbing fixtures in the market. One of Zurn's many new environmentally friendly and water-conserving fixtures is the Pressure Assist Dual Flush Toilet System. The Dual Flush Tank Toilet reduces water consumption at minimum of 20% compared to standard 1.6 gallons per flush fixtures. This particular toilet can operate between 20 to 125 psi's and in turn leaves the bowl cleaner after each flush and relieves waste more vigorously due to the enlarged trapway and water spot. The Pressure Assist tank outperforms the gravity siphon jet tank with a combination of both air and water, which leads to preventions of sewer stoppages and the improvement of drain line carry. The Pressure Assist toilet is available for retrofit rebate opportunities and lead points by meeting the 20% water savings criteria. This fixture is ADA compliant, IAPMO listed, and certified under ANSI and ASME, A112.119.14, ASSE 1037-99, and CSA B125. Zurn Pressure Assist Model B8106 Component List. The Zurn Pressure Assist toilet package includes the following components: the lower inlet supply with hose, the 15/16 inlet connector with filter screen, the pressure regulator and relief valve, and the supply hose to the upper assembly. The upper supply assembly includes the air inducer and the anti-siphon with check ball valve, the nameplate with the product information, the Flush Valve Cartridge assembly, the vessel itself, the discharge extension with drain, and the flush control valve assembly. Installation process. When proceeding with the installation process of the Pressure Assist toilet, it is important to follow these instructions very carefully. Caution: make sure the water is turned off and all air pressure is released before servicing. The EcoFlush pressure-assisted system can only be used with specified Zurn bowls, for example, jetted pressure-assisted toilet bowls. Never do the following: use lubricants on any component unless instructed. Use corrosive disinfectants, bowl liquid or solid chlorine in tank. Install pressure-assisted vessel in a gravity flushing water closet tank. Follow the manufacturer's instructions provided with toilet and tank. One must use the washers, gaskets, and nuts provided. Install the toilet tank onto the bowl before connecting the water supply line to the water inlet and clear the supply line. Do this by running a couple gallons of water into a bucket to ensure no debris is exiting. Check locking keys, 3 locking tabs, to make sure they are locked pointing upward. Slowly turn on water, checking for leaks. After installation. Once the installation process is complete, be sure to check the following. Be sure to verify the water pressure is set between 20 to 125 psi. Next, flush the unit several times to get rid of any excess air. If a problem should occur, shut the water off and flush the air from the vessel. If no flushing takes place at all, then make sure the water is off. Remove the connector line nut that connects the upper assembly and the flush valve cartridge, and this will eliminate the pressure inside the vessel. Troubleshooting. Condition 1. No water flows into the vessel. If the water pressure is below 20 psi, the unit will not function properly. Note: the recommended static pressure range by code is 20 psi to 125 psi. If you cannot increase the water pressure to the required level, the unit will not function properly. Check the following to make sure that there is no mechanical reason for the low pressure. Step 1. Make sure the water supply valve is fully open. Step 2. Check the debris filter screen for any obstruction that would restrict the water supply pressure. To check the debris screen, shut off the water supply, flush the toilet to discharge any pressure, then disconnect the supply line. Remove the debris screen from the threaded connector shank and flush any debris which might prevent the flow of water through the filter screen. Replace and turn the water supply on, checking for leaks. Step 3. Check to ensure that there are no kinks in the supply lines or connector lines between lower and upper supply assemblies, which would prevent the flow of water into the system. Also check that there are no leaks at any of the connections. Step 4. Check the flush control valve for any leaks and make sure the connections are also tight. If water is leaking from the flush control valve, then the flush control valve should be replaced. Step 5. Check the flush valve cartridge for air leaks by pouring a small amount of water onto the area around the top of the flush valve cartridge. If air bubbles are visible, then you must remove the flush valve cartridge and check the flush valve O-ring for damage and to see that it is properly positioned in the vessel. To remove the flush valve cartridge, proceed as follows. Step A. Shut off the water supply and flush the toilet to remove any remaining water or air pressure before starting the procedure. Step B. Remove the quick connector line between the upper supply assembly and the flush valve cartridge by rotating the locking tab downward. Remove the supply line and set it aside. Step C. Disconnect the two black flush control lines from the flush valve cartridge and pull gently outward on the lines. These flush control lines are equipped with locking tabs, and the lines are connected by left line of the flush control to the left port of the flush valve cartridge, and the right to the right-facing port of the flush valve cartridge. Step D. Remove the flush valve cartridge assembly using the tool provided. Using the flush valve cartridge tool, engage the teeth of the tool with the slots on the top of the flush valve cartridge, and with the aid of the wrench, rotate the flush valve cartridge counterclockwise 1/4 turn. Then lift the flush valve cartridge up, removing the flush valve cartridge and the upper O-ring. Inspect the upper O-ring and the flush valve seat of the flush valve cartridge. Step E. Reinstall the flush valve cartridge assembly. First, position the O-ring in the flush valve seat, and then carefully insert the cartridge into the vessel, making sure that the O-ring stays in the proper position. Using the tool to align the dual connectors at the 5 o'clock position, and while gently pushing down on the cartridge, rotate the cartridge clockwise 1/4 turn to lock the flush valve cartridge into position, with connector ports aligned and facing forward, indicating that the flush valve cartridge is now locked into the proper position. Do not use lubricants on the O-ring or internal part of the EcoFlush, as this will void the warranty and cause damage to the system. Step F. Reconnect the upper supply quick connect line by aligning the locking tab and pushing inward. Rotate the locking tab upward to lock the line into position. Step G. Reconnect the supply lines. Step H. Turn on the water supply and check all lines carefully for leaks. To ensure that the flush valve cartridge O-ring is properly seated, pour water onto the top of the flush valve cartridge and check for air leaks. Test flush the unit several times to clear excess air and continue use. Step 6. If steps 4 and 5 do not resolve the problem, then it will be necessary to replace the flush valve cartridge, including the O-ring. Condition 2. Water runs and will not shut off. Note: the recommended static pressure range by code is 20 psi to 125 psi. If sufficient supply pressure has been verified and the toilet continues to run, the following steps may be required. Step 1. Make sure the water supply valve is fully open. Step 2. Check the flush control valve for any leaks and make sure the connections are also tight. If water is leaking from the flush control valve, then the flush control valve should be replaced. Step 3. Check to ensure that there are no leaks in the supply line and connector lines, which would prevent the proper function of the system. Step 4. Check the flush valve cartridge assembly for proper installation and use the water test to check for air leaks around the top of the flush valve cartridge. Proceed as follows. If the flush valve cartridge has an air leak, you need to check the flush valve and the O-ring seal. Step 5. Turn off the water supply and flush the toilet to relieve any pressure. Remove the flush valve cartridge assembly using the flush valve tool. To remove the flush valve cartridge assembly, disconnect the 3 lines, the supply line from the upper supply assembly, and the 2 lines from the flush valve cartridge. You may disconnect these lines by moving the tabs into the unlocked position and pulling gently on the lines. Step 6. Using the tool provided, engage the interlocking teeth and rotate the flush valve cartridge counterclockwise 1/4 turn. Then lift the flush valve cartridge up, removing it from the vessel. Step 7. Inspect the flush valve cartridge large O-ring at the top of the cartridge and also check the lower O-ring for damage or if it is properly seated. Never use any lubricants on any of the parts of the EcoFlush, as this will void the warranty and cause damage to the parts. Step 8. Reinstall the flush valve cartridge assembly. First, insert the cartridge into the vessel. While gently pushing down on the cartridge, turn the cartridge clockwise 1/4 turn to lock the flush valve cartridge into position with connector ports aligned and facing forward, indicating that the locking lugs are now aligned. Connect the 3 quick connect lines. Turn on the water and check carefully for leaks. Step 9. If the tank continues to run, remove the flush valve cartridge and check that the lower piston is in the proper position, and check the large O-ring to ensure that it is properly seated. When the vessel is filled and the water stops running, it is an indication that the vessel is filled and ready to continue normal use. Step 10. If the water continues through the vessel into the toilet after completing steps 1 through 9, the flush valve cartridge should be replaced. Check the lower inlet supply assembly to see if the pressure relief valve is leaking or allowing water to flow into the tank. If water is leaking from the pressure regulator and relief valve of the lower inlet supply assembly, the lower inlet supply assembly must be replaced. Condition 3. Weak or sluggish flush. Step 1. Note: the recommended static pressure range by code is 20 psi to 125 psi. If sufficient supply pressure has been verified and the toilet continues to run, the following steps may be required. If the pressure is within the defined limits, then you will want to flush the system a couple of times to remove any debris that may be limiting the flow of water to the vessel. Step 2. Check for debris in the filter screen system at the water inlet for any obstruction that might limit the flow of water into the vessel. To do this, shut off the water supply, flush the unit to relieve any pressure, and disconnect the water supply line from the threaded connector. You can remove the filter screen easily using a set of long nose pliers. Clean and replace the filter screen. Then reconnect the water supply and check the water flow. Step 3. Make sure that the vessel has sufficient time to fully recharge. The lower the pressure, the longer the time to recharge the vessel. We suggest that you allow at least 2 minutes between flush cycles. Winterizing tank procedure. Step 1. Turn off the water supply line valve and remove the toilet tank lid or cover. Step 2. Flush the system to discharge all of the water from the vessel. Step 3. Disconnect the supply line coupling nut from the connector shank. Note: a small amount of water will drip out of the shank. Be prepared to collect it in a bucket or sponge it up. You may also remove the toilet tank lid and use an old towel to soak up any water that may accumulate in the bottom of the tank. Step 4. Flush the vessel to ensure that all air and water has been discharged. Bowl procedure. After flushing out the vessel, remove any remaining water from the bowl or add 1 pint to 1 quart of antifreeze or RV antifreeze to the water remaining in the bowl. For more information, contact Zurn Industries, LLC, Commercial Brass Operation, 5900 Elwyn Buchanan Drive, Sanford, North Carolina, 27330. Call 1-800-997-3876. Fax 919-775-3541 or visit us on the web at www.zurn.com.